Hey, so today I'm going to show you how to make this sunflower halter top. I love that you only need 3 granny squares and that it laces up, which makes it really easy to adjust to your size. So let's get started. For the sunflower granny squares, you'll need at least 3 colors of worsted weight yarn plus whatever color you're going to use for the border. I used a mix of cotton and acrylic yarns, and I really like how each yarn has its own texture, so this is a great way to use up some of your old yarn scraps. I used a 4mm hook to make the top, but for the sunflower granny square part of this video, I'll be using a bigger hook and brighter colors so that you guys can see what I'm doing. So, for the center of your sunflower, you'll start by chaining 4, and then you're going to slip stitch into the first chain to make a small circle. You could also use a magic circle here, it doesn't make a big difference. For round 1, you're going to work 8 single crochet stitches into the circle, inserting your hook through the center of the ring each time you make a new stitch. When you get back to the first stitch you made in that round, go ahead and slip stitch into it to complete the circle. For round 2, you're going to chain 2 and then work 1 double crochet into the first stitch of the previous round. After that, you're going to work 2 double crochet stitches into each remaining stitch. You should end up with 16 double crochet stitches in round 2. Slip stitch again to close the circle before you move on to the next round. We're going to work round 3 in a new color, and it's going to be made up of half double crochet clusters. In a written pattern, this would be written as half double crochet 3 together, chain 1. For the first cluster, you'll want to chain 2 and then start working a half double crochet into the first stitch of the previous round. Yarn over, insert your hook through the stitch, pull the working yarn through, and yarn over again. Pull that yarn through the first 2 loops, but not the very last loop on your hook. Then, do that whole thing over again one more time and you should end up with 3 loops on your hook. Now yarn over and pull your yarn through all 3 of those loops to tie everything together and chain 1. Now you're just going to work 1 cluster of 3 half double crochet together stitches into every space, so you should end up with 16 petals in total. When you get back to the first stitch you made in that round, go ahead and slip stitch into it to complete the circle. For round 4, you're going to be working clusters of 4 double crochet together stitches into each of the chain 1 spaces from the previous round. You're going to chain 3, yarn over, insert your hook into your work, and pull your yarn through. Then yarn over again and pull through 2 of the loops on your hook. Yarn over again and pull it through just 1 of the loops on your hook, and now you should have 2 loops left. Repeat this until you have 4 double crochet stitches looped onto your hook. Then yarn over and pull through all of the loops on your hook, just like we did with the previous round, and finally chain 2. You'll be working 2 chains in between each double crochet 4 together stitch, and again you should end up with 16 petals in this round. Your flower will probably start to curl in on itself at this point, but it'll lay flat once you block everything. Now it's time to decide where we want our corners to be. 4 goes into 16 4 times, so we're going to have 4 petals in between each corner. I marked my corners with stitch markers because I'm way too lazy to keep counting, and now it's time to start the last round in the 4th color. For the last round, you'll start by chaining 3 and working a double crochet into the space between your first 2 flower petals. I think it's easier to start at a corner, so go ahead and increase by chaining 2 and working 2 more double crochets into that same space, which makes a corner. And now you have your first corner. Now, chain 1 and work 2 double crochet into the next space between the petals. You'll keep following that pattern all the way around, increasing at the 4 corners so that your circle turns into a square. I know most people tend to do groups of 3 double crochets when they're making a granny square, but I think you can get away with just 2, and it does actually save a little bit of yarn, so that's what I'm doing here. When you get back to the beginning of the round, chain 1 and slip stitch to finish up your last round. Cut your yarn, and now you have a sunflower granny square. I always steam block my work before weaving in my ends, and this is the part of crocheting that I hate the most. It's also the main reason I don't do a lot of granny square projects. I'm very particular about weaving my ends in so that they don't ever come unraveled, which makes this whole process take forever, but I'll tell you this, I've never had a project unravel after I washed it, so there. I'll be over here with my OCD weaving in my ends until the end of time. So looking at these 2 squares side by side, you can see that just changing my hook size really affected the size of my sunflower square itself. I think the bigger one would be great for making a blanket or a pillow, but I tend to stick with my 4mm hook whenever I'm making clothing, so I'm going to switch back over to that for the cups. To make the cups, I found this chart on Pinterest, and while the rest of the pattern that went with it is written in Russian, it's still really easy to follow this kind of chart. You need a foundation chain of 17 stitches, and that chain is going to become the center of your cup. Once you've got your center chain of 17 stitches, you're going to work back and forth on either side, increasing at one end with 4 stitches separated by 1 chain. Now, this chart says to use a half double crochet stitch, but I totally spaced out and did double crochets, and it did turn out just fine. To start your first row, chain 3 and work a double crochet into the 4th chain from the hook. After that, you're just going to work 1 double crochet into each chain in your foundation row. When you get to the last chain, double crochet 2, chain 1, and work 2 more double crochets into that same space. And then continue down the opposite side with 1 double crochet in each chain space. The second row is worked exactly like the first row, and the rest of your rows after that will follow the same pattern. Depending on what stitch you're using, it should only take about 4 or 5 rows until your cup is big enough to cover the area that it needs to cover, but obviously that's going to be a little bit different for everybody. You might have to play with the number of chains in your center foundation row, and I actually prefer to use a single crochet stitch on tops so that they don't end up being see-through, but the benefit of using a double crochet stitch here is that your project will come together really quickly, which I do like. So once you've got 2 identical cups that you're happy with, you're ready to piece everything together. You'll start by attaching the cups to each other, and then we'll do the sunflowers after that. You can hand sew all of your pieces together if you like, but it's a lot faster to just use the single crochet stitch to connect your pieces, so that's what I'm going to be doing here. First, you'll want to connect your cups together with a 1 or 2 inch seam, depending on how low cut you want your top to be, and after that, you'll be connecting the top of your squares to the bottom of your cups. I tend to just kind of eyeball this part because I'm not doing math or counting unless I absolutely have to, but I ended up using my stitch markers to hold the corners in place so that everything stayed centered. Again, don't get caught up trying to count stitches here, you just want a good solid seam without any big holes or gaps. And you can fix a lot of your mistakes whenever you go to weave in your ends. Anyway, once you've got the sunflowers connected to your cups, you're going to want to do the same thing down the rest of your seams. Just remember to keep all of your seams on the inside of your work where people won't see them. I mean, you could have them on the outside if you like that, but that is totally up to you. So now we have all of our pieces put together and we are going to go around the entire perimeter to make a border, which will make our edges look a lot nicer. Starting at whichever corner you like and working with the right side facing you, you're going to continue the granny square pattern around the sunflowers and working 2 double crochet stitches in between each space from the previous row. Once you get to the cups, you're going to switch over to 1 double crochet in each space, and then you'll increase again at the top of each cup. Keep going until you get back to the beginning of that round, and now you can finally weave in the rest of your ends. I don't generally like my tops to be super low cut, so I opted for an extra drawstring in between the cups. I always use 2 strands of yarn anytime I'm making a drawstring because I find that it's a lot easier to tie and untie a thicker cord. The drawstring in the front is about 2 feet long, and I added some metal beads for decoration and to weigh down the drawstrings. The back drawstring's length is going to depend on how wide your back and shoulders are. I generally wear a small to medium-sized top, and my drawstring was about 3.5 yards long. I can't even tell you how many stitches that was. I pretty much just kept adding chains until I had the length that I wanted. The center of that long drawstring is going to fall at the back of your neck, and then you'll take each of the drawstring ends and pull them down through the top of the cup, back around your shoulder and behind your arm, and then through the side of your cup. Depending on how big your chest is and how much coverage you want, you might want to play with where your laces are pulled through. And yes, I was able to lace this up and put it on my own body, but without any lining in the cups, they are very see-through. So before I wear this out anywhere, I will have to either line it or get a backless, strapless bra. Anyway, that's it. I hope you guys found this useful. Please subscribe and let me know what you'd like to see next. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the future.